Welcome to Sitting with Sallie. Today I have with me David Segerts. He's working out of a Ne Chee Friendship Centre at the Kije Anishinaabe NEEN program. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much. It's actually pronounced Kije Anishinaabe NEEN. And what
Was
it means...
I close?
That was very close, very close. And what it means is, I'm a kind man. So basically, the whole idea of the program was to work with males, young and old, that are dealing with domestic violence situations in this particular case. It's all about dealing with your anger and learning how to control your anger. And sometimes we need to do that by stepping out of our comfort zone and trying something new that we've never tried before. Because the idea is we want to change, we hope to change the way a man thinks about violence, about his role in a family.
One of the things that I find quite astounding is that all my working life I have been very aware of domestic violence, and the statistics haven't changed. 20, 30, 40 years. It's quite astounding.
Yes, it is. I strongly believe that the media plays a big part in the promoting of violence against women as well. So it's systemic, it's generational, and is also promoted by media and music and television.
And the roles that women still are in today.
Exactly. The idea with the Kije Anishinaabe NEEN is that we want to start instilling or making men aware of what their role is, of what their role was before the oppression, before the discrimination, before all this came into play. There was a system that was in place, and so we're trying to bring them back to that.
And how to get back there again.
How to get back there again.
So how did you get interested in this work?
It's always been a real lifelong passion for me. I was around it. I witnessed it a lot in my younger years.
When you say witnessed it?
Well, just being in the same room as it happening. Like growing up in a violent family and not having any place to go to while it's going on. And so being right in it was part of it, but it didn't really dawn on me personally until I was in my 30s. One of my best friends was just an incredible woman, like just a real godsend to everybody. And she was working in Calgary as an executive secretary for a major oil company downtown. And I talked to her just before Christmas one year. And she was really excited to hear from me. And we talked for quite a while on the phone. And then she said, "Please call me on New Year's Eve, Dave." And I made it a point to call her on New Year's Eve, but there was never an answer. It took me a week and a bit to find out what had happened. I finally contacted my ex-girlfriend, who was her sister, and she told me that she had been murdered by her partner. Apparently he had went to school and picked up his children. They weren't her children. He went to school, picked up his children, 2 daughters, took them home and murdered them, chopped them to pieces, and waited until she got home. And when she walked in the door, he did the same thing to her. So that was one of the cases who was, she was a very, very close friend of mine. And I'm still, I still grieve over that.
I was going to say, that's something you don't get over.
No, you don't. And another very close friend of mine who was just a big heart. She had one of the biggest hearts in the world, and she was a very helpful person. She got into a relationship with a domestic, an abuser, and in Vancouver. And she was thrown out of the hotel window, and she was beaten and thrown out of a window. So in a lot of instances, it's directly affected me or indirectly affected me through friends or family.
It's been in your life then?
It's been in my life for a long time. And a lot of my younger, a lot of people that I hung out with in the younger years promoted it, and they encouraged it, and they thought it was okay. And I was always on the stand, always in the background looking at it and saying, this isn't right. Nobody deserves this.
No one, for sure, no one deserves this, but it's very hard. You're talking about you being a young child, being in a violent home, seeing violence.
Right.
How do you step beyond that?
Well, I had to do a lot of personal work, getting in touch with where I came from, who I was before. Um, my own family history, my father died working on the fish boats. He was a fisherman, and he was out fishing with some other people when the fish boat drifted away. They were having lunch on an island, and the boat drifted away. And my father swam out to get this boat, but he couldn't climb into the boat because those fish boats are pretty big. But he couldn't climb in, so he ended up drowning while he was trying to save the life of these other people. And so the company that he was working for, they coerced my mother into signing some forms. So we were never given compensation for his death. And from that, it just snowballed, where my mother lost all of my brothers and sisters to the system because she couldn't afford to take care of them through the system. Being a single mother herself, and from residential school where she didn't have an education, she was denied an education. So the violence was always there.
And I was going to say also systemic violence that you see.
Exactly, it was there right from the start, I would imagine. But it didn't affect me until later on in life. And I seen the violence, and I seen it every day kind of thing, or most days. And so I began to think that that's what normality was. But it took a little while for me to figure out that that wasn't right. And then when I found out that it wasn't right, it wasn't until I sobered up. I sobered up in 1990, and that's when I started to really look at the violence and my part in it.
I was going to say, so you were participating in violence as well?
Totally. I was no different than any other man, and I suffered the same things as any other man, but I found a way to get out of it, and that was by dealing with myself.
What happened in 1990?
I sobered up. I just decided one day, I woke up one morning and I just said, no more. I'm tired of this. I don't want this anymore. And I haven't touched it since. So it's been 26 years of an incredible journey.
Okay. So sobering up is obviously one step. That certainly isn't enough to take you.
Absolutely not. It's just the beginning. It's the first step to dealing with yourself. It's a first step to looking at who you really are, or what do you want to do, or what decisions do you want to make. And so when I sobered up, the first thing that I had to do was figure out what made David think, what made me tick. So I started to look for help. I started to reach out to organizations who could help me. I started to see a counselor. I started to deal with my own personal thoughts and why they were there. And I ended up in seeing a psychologist for a lot of years as well to try to get to that part and to
So this is definitely a journey and not just good, I'm sober, here's the new David.
Oh, absolutely not. Anybody who does that's kind of fooling with themselves, because you need to do that journey. Okay. You need to heal. You need to figure out what caused you to drink in the beginning.
So, David, we're going to take a short break, and then if you can come back and just pick up from there, that would be great.
Sure.
Okay. Please join us in a few minutes on David's journey. Welcome back to Sitting with Sallie. I have with me David Segerts, and we're talking about his journey to where he is today in being able to help other men deal with their violence. And one of the things we've talked about in the past is that the medicine wheel became very important to you.
The medicine wheel was introduced to me in and around 1990 when I sobered up.
Now, before you talk about how it became important to you, can you just tell me a bit about what the medicine wheel means?
Well, at the time, it didn't mean anything to me.
Okay.
It was just a circle, and it wasn't until I started to ask questions about it and to ask what does it mean? How does this relate to me? And so when I started to look at the medicine wheel and I started to understand about the four colors, like the white race, the black race, the red man, and the Chinese, and how they're all connected. And then I started to look at the other areas of the medicine wheel too, like what each area meant. And so when I'm looking at it, I try to associate say the physical being, because the medicine wheel is broken down into four colors, four quadrants, four seasons, the four elements. And I didn't realize that how connected
All
it was.
interconnected.
And so when I started to look at the medicine wheel, I started to look at my emotional and my mental state, and then my physical state, and how they were all affected, and my spiritual state, like what was my belief system like? And so when I started to connect those all together and really look at them for what they were, what does it mean? What does it mean to be emotional? You know, what does it mean to be mental? Like what is those exactly? What do they mean? So a mental state would be the way you think. And so we normally, when you come from the kind of background that I came from, thinking is totally distorted. We don't see it as normal. And so I started to look at my thinking and see how that was connected to me and how it was affecting my emotional being, like the way I was feeling. So when you're thinking things, it's going to affect your feelings about it. And I didn't see that before. And then it would affect my physical being, because then I'm all stressed out, or I'm like tired or something, right? And if you're tired, and if you're emotionally drained, and you're physically drained and mentally drained, then it's going to bother you, it's going to affect you spiritually.
Each one
affects the other part. And so when I started to see that and connect the dots for myself, I was like, okay, so now I understand how it can be a personal thing. Now what do I do with it? Because now this is mine, I own it. How do I take care of it?
One of the things I often think that men who act violently is that anger comes up really quickly.
A lot of the anger isn't really, it doesn't start out as anger. I think a lot of it starts out as fear. Fear of not being able to express yourself, fear of not knowing the right words to express yourself, or not even understanding what your feelings are. That's where fear originates. And then it explodes into anger and violence because you don't know how to handle it. So it's learning some coping skills on how to deal with that.
And
that
also
feeling.
learning that it is fear, but you have to look at.
Yes, yeah. And try to find a solution. I always say that there's only two decisions. You have two choices in life. And I tell everybody that. You only have two choices in this life. You're either going to make the right decision or you're going to make the wrong one. And then you have to live with that.
And those choices are happening all the time.
Daily, all day long. As far as I'm concerned, it's 24/7 working on yourself, looking at the way you conduct yourself.
So in 1990, you started the journey working with Medicine Wheel, with support. And how is the Medicine Wheel still part of your life today?
I use the medicine wheel in every part of my life, every day. So when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is I do a mental check. Before I even get out of bed, I do a mental check and I say, okay, how are you emotionally? How are you spiritually? Like, how are your thoughts today? And I do that before I get up. I do a check, and then I'm able to get up and start my day. If I'm feeling like really confused about my day, then I'm going to start looking at my mental part and seeing how I can work that to balance it out with the other areas. Because each part of your medicine wheel has its own medicine wheel as well. So if you're looking, like say, for instance, if I'm looking at my mental part of my medicine wheel, I'm also going to look at my emotional, my physical, my spiritual.
Because they all
areas.
feed into, you can't separate them really.
You can't separate none of the parts because they all work together. And so with that, it's like it's an everyday thing, being, checking on your emotional state and checking on the way you think, or how you're going to conduct yourself.
And how has that changed your life?
Well, it turned me from being a violent man to being a gentle, kind man, being able to express myself in a more constructive way, and being heard, as opposed to when I was an angry person, nobody was listening to me.
No, because the anger gets in the way.
The anger gets in the way, it controls you. Mm-hmm. And it can't control anybody if you allow it to.
It sounds like the journey was fairly straightforward. I'm assuming that that's not so.
Absolutely not. It was full of it was a journey. It was a real journey. because there was a lot of ups and downs. I lost a lot of really close people in my sobriety, family members, friends, jobs, careers. So I've lost a lot of things in my sobriety, but it was the medicine wheel that kept me going each day. So it didn't affect me. It didn't drag me down there. I didn't fall into a depression. It was almost like, for me, I saw it as a challenge to do something better or to do something else.
I was going to say, I imagine, yes, you would have lost, but you also must have gained.
I guess I gained some self-respect. Yeah.
That's huge.
It is a huge thing to have and to carry. To be able to conduct yourself in a good, positive way daily. It can be challenging, and you're up against a lot of obstacles and a lot of racism and discrimination and oppression, but it's not ever stopped me from carrying on or following through.
And knowing that what you're doing is right for you.
It's right for me.
Okay. We're going to take another short break.
Mm-hmm.
When we come back, I would like to talk about how you've taken this to be able to help other people.
Sure, I can
You can do that.
definitely do that.
So please join us again in a few moments. Welcome back to Sitting with Sallie. I have David Segerts with me. He is talking about being a kind man. And David, it sounds like your journey has allowed you now to be able to help other men.
It definitely took a turnaround back in 2003. I was working in television at the time, and I was a set decorator. I was doing some volunteer work for an organization downtown Vancouver called Access, which is Aboriginal Community Career Employment Services Society. Long name. But they had heard about me. I don't know how, but they approached me and asked me if I was interested in working with youth. I had no idea what that meant, and working with people was the furthest thing from my mind. But they saw something in me. And so they introduced me to a program called Blade Runners, and that's what it was. It was working with Aboriginal youth, getting them involved in their trades. But it didn't last long because the company saw some potential in me, and instead they sent me back to school to become a counselor. And when I graduated, I went right into counseling, and I've been a counselor since. My main focus has always been working with Aboriginal men. It's always been a desire to me to help Aboriginal men to get themselves out of the, I guess, out of the state that they're in. Dealing with violence has always been an issue for me. And being a violent man myself at one point, there was a point where I had to start taking personal responsibility for my own thoughts and my actions. So when I was introduced to this program and I started to look at myself, because I couldn't see myself going out there and telling people to do something that I wasn't doing myself. And so I had to start doing it. And I started to look at the violence. And at one point I said to myself, you know, David, you have to take responsibility for yourself, for your own actions. If you think that there's something not right, then it's up to you to try to figure out how to right that wrong. And so by by inflicting violence or coercing somebody is not the solution. You have to try to figure out what can you do that's, a more positive way.
Do men, when they come into your program, say, but this is what has been done to me? I've grown up in a violent home. I've had this done. I've lost this. How can I help but be what I am?
Yes, it does happen. The other thing that also happens is a lot of men tend to blame the women for the violence that's inflicted on the women. So it doesn't make no sense to me. But when I look at it, yes, to me, it's happened. Yes, all this stuff did happen to you.
And a lot of it's pretty bad.
A lot of it can be really extreme.
Yeah.
Like in my case, like being molested and being raped as a young person, I could have let that affect me. But at some point in time, I had to take responsibility and say, yes, it happened, but what am I going to do about it now so that I'm not going to do it to somebody else, or I don't become that victim?
And in some ways, it's a decision whether you let the past define who you are.
It is. I strongly believe that people need to get out of the victim role. If you want to be successful, if you want to let go of all this trauma, you need to let go of that role. And instead of saying, I am a victim, find another way of defining who you were. Because you may have been a victim at that moment, but you're not a victim today. You have choices. You can make the correct choice by looking for help, by seeking out professional help.
And by gaining self-respect again.
By gaining some self-respect through getting the help. Like, self-respect is not just there. You have to earn it. You have to go out and get it by doing the work, by learning how to conduct yourself.
So these are pretty powerful messages. First of all, you're talking about gaining self-respect, but you're also talking about taking personal responsibility and making choices, and consciously making choices every day.
Every day, all day long, you're making choices.
And they're good, bad, or...
They're good, bad, and they're going to affect your next move.
Part of it then sounds like there has to be a consciousness of recognizing that this is a choice you can make or not make.
I think part of it is that, and part of it is becoming consciously aware that, how would you say?
You don't get from here to here without...
Exactly, without the work.
Yeah.
And without taking the steps. So I think that a lot of the, when I'm working with the men in particular, and they're coming to me and they're using these excuses, because that's what I see them as, they're excuses for their behavior. It's time that you look at that excuse and say, okay, what is my part in this? What did I do to cause this? And you may have not done anything today. It might have been something that you did last week. So it's like taking on that personal responsibility for what you did, whenever you did it, and saying, okay, I'm responsible for this. Now, how can I move beyond this, or how can we move beyond this?
What if someone says to you, but David, it's just too hard?
I'm there to support you. And if I'm not there to support you, there are other people there to support you. The idea behind the Kijé Anishinaabe program is that we want to get the men to support each other. We would like to get a support group where these men can call each other and support each other and say, I'm having a problem today, can we sit down and talk, or can we get together? So the whole idea was to find our men who can support each other.
So it's important to realize you're not taking the step alone. There are people always around to help support you.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are people out there if you know where to find them. You can call any organization, like, say, for instance, in this case, Ne Chee, and we have programs that help all families there, and we can reach out and help.
I think that's an important message too, because I think a lot of time people think there isn't the help or support, that they're stuck in wherever they're stuck alone.
I know that as a single father, I really struggled with that. Back in the 90s, when I became a single father, I had a hard time reaching out for the support, and I don't know if it was my ego, if it was pride, or just, I don't know what it was, but I struggled with reaching out for help. And so I think it's really important that we have to understand that the help is there.
So when you don't reach out, you're stuck alone.
You're stuck alone.
Yeah.
And so it's getting out of that. It's like the Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. It's a group of people that help each other and support each other through their struggles.
And in a way, you're talking about trying to create community through I'm a Kind Man.
I'm trying to create some kind of community, I guess like a group that can just support each other and pass the message on that there is help for each individual out there.
So if someone is listening to this and is interested in this program, what one thing do they need to bring with them to get involved with the program?
Just a desire to change. It doesn't require a fee. It doesn't require a membership. It just requires a desire to change the way you view the world, the way you want to respond to the world.
And the desire to change, what will that lead to?
For myself, the change led to a more manageable lifestyle. I don't have conflict. I don't have chaos. I don't have any of these things around me today. My days are pretty, pretty well organized and straightforward.
Well, and I think you have, as well as self-respect, you also have respect from others too.
I've gained a total respect for all people around me in my healing journey, because there was a point where I just didn't have any respect for anybody else, and that too is taught, like it's a taught behavior. And so when I'm looking at it today, I think that as a man in the community, we need to take responsibility for who we are and where we come from and what do we want to do. Because I have a granddaughter today, and to me, protecting her has become number one. And so I want to teach, I want to be able to reach out to the dad and say, okay, this is how I would like to see us working with my granddaughter.
Only men can stop the violence.
Only us can stop it. Only us can point it out to each other. Yeah. And I'm kind of taking that step right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've
Sallie.
enjoyed this conversation. And thank you for joining us with Sitting with Sallie. I think David has a very important message for everyone.